When Alberta's minister responsible for the Alberta Human Rights Act said the government was going to try to make improvements, many people were very enthusiastic. After all, Alberta's human rights legislation was widely deemed to be lacking on several fronts: on sexual orientation, on its hate speech section, and in the way it administers complaints. When the government unveiled its proposed changes, the reaction was one of concern and, in some cases, utter disbelief. Instead of addressing most of the areas of concern, the government ventured into new territory. It opened the door to allowing parents to remove children from classes dealing with sexuality or religion. Teachers, school boards, parents, and superintendents protested loudly. The opposition parties called for a halt, with the New Democrats launching a petition against the bill. The Sheldon Schumer Foundation for Ethics and Leadership, which had been working for several years to bring about necessary changes to the Human Rights Act, called the bill worrying, a disappointment, and stunningly unimpressive. Today, we want to hear from you. What do you think of the reaction to Bill 44, and what do you think of the changes themselves? Do you agree with the comments from the Alberta educators and the Sheldon Schumer Foundation? Do you think these criticisms are well-founded, or do you think they're misplaced? Our guest to guide us in our discussion today is policy analyst and lawyer Ken Chapman of Cambridge Strategies in Edmonton. The toll-free number to join our conversation, 1-866-468-4422. That is 1-866-468-4422. Ken Chapman, welcome back to the program.
Hi, Donna.
What did you think when you heard that the minister responsible for the Alberta Human Rights Act, Lindsay Blackett, was going to bring forward updated legislation?
I was exactly as your summary put it. I said it's about time we had sexual orientation actually written in. I was encouraged. It was going to be there. I heard the debate quietly around Section 3, which is the free speech and discriminatory speech provisions. And I think everybody had reconciled to themselves to the fact that that should go out. And there was some debate about that, but the rest of it became quite astounding and astonishing.
Before we get to the parts that people really have a problem with, let's talk about the positive aspects to Bill 44. What did the government do you think, that was absolutely necessary?
Writing sexual orientation into the Act. It was decided 10 years ago by the Supreme Court. It was written in, as they say, into the Act. It was deemed to be there, but we've been a long time actually coming together and putting it into the Act. We haven't opened the Act up for a long time. That was the only really big thing.
Mm-hmm. And you were expecting, you said, that the government would deal with the section dealing with hate speech, but the government could easily have made changes there, but chose not to. What did you make of that? I was a little bit surprised. I think that what had happened in my discussions with people in caucus is that while there was a rigorous debate about it, that it was understood that Section 3 of the Provincial Act and Section 13 of the Federal Act is something that was put in during the Mulroney years, but it really isn't very effective, and it's not something the Human Rights Commission should be dealing with. There's criminal code provisions to deal with that, and there's other ways of dealing with it. But I was surprised to see it remaining in, because I understood it was going to go, and people had reconciled themselves to that fact. Mm-hmm. But then, of course, everybody was just swept up in the change to do with the section dealing with parents' rights to remove children from classes on religion or sexuality. Why do you think that the government took that step? Isn't that already dealt with in the Education Act?
Well, that's right. I think there's some politics at play here, and there's a difference in the big tent Progressive Conservative Party and how people see things going on. I think it astounded everybody that it came in. It's not necessary. It's all well adequately covered. It's been there for over 20 years in the School Act, and it's working very, very well. And it deals with religious instruction. This Section 11.1 deals with the concept of religion. It deals with sexuality and sexual orientation. And the great irony is we finally wrote sexual orientation into our human rights legislation, and now we say that it's something to be exempted for parents can exempt their children from that class when that stuff comes up. But the other scary thing about it is this is impossible to administer. In fact, I got an email the other day from a friend who said, well, if you can't talk about religion, sexuality, and sexual orientation, does that mean the schools can't teach about the Charter of Rights? Because that's all in there.
Okay. So, and the danger of placing something like this within the bounds of the human rights legislation is what? What could happen? Ken, why is this of such great concern to teachers and educators all over?
Because what it does, it extends and expands the concept of exemption, and it gives a right to complain to the Human Rights Commission, which means the whole matter could go to a hearing.
Right. So you could, just by talking about it, a teacher, just by raising it or even talking about something in current events, could get brought before the Human Rights Commission and have to justify the way they teach in class.
Oh, it's even worse than that. The chill that's going to happen if somebody from a classmate brings it up and starts discussing it, and somebody takes offense. You can't give the notice on such broad topics and in such a way. In the curriculum, in the School Act, it says matters of religious instruction and patriotic instruction. Those are, at the beginning of the year, the school boards say, these are the things that we're going to discuss in this class on these days, so you now know when you can exempt your child. But it's religious instruction. So in the Catholic system, they have religious instruction. There are people in the Catholic system who are not Catholics. They may wish to exclude their children from those kinds of elements, and they can do it now. But what this does is talk about religion. Does that mean we don't talk about the Crusades or the Reformation? It's way too fuzzy, it's way too broad, and it's absolutely going to chill teachers and school trustees and really undermine our public education.
Ken, you can speak to this from a policy analyst perspective as well as a legal perspective because you're a lawyer, and you also are very tied in with the politics as well. You understand what's going on here. And I want to hear the backstory before we get to our callers. Why do you think the government did this? How did this land in the bill in the first place, especially since it's created such a firestorm of criticism?
I'm only speculating, but my guess is that the far right and the fundamentalist religious elements in the Progressive Conservative Party I think negotiated a quid pro quo for the sexual orientation provisions being written in the Act. I said, if you're going to write those things in, what are you going to do for us? I'm guessing, but that's what I think happened. That's what the politics here smell like. They shouldn't have negotiated it. It's the law of the land. We should have done it almost 10 years ago. We're finally getting around to it, and there's nothing to negotiate here. But I think somebody got suckered by trying to make peace in their time, and I think the party is worried about their right flank and it's separating off or something like that, as we've seen before in the federal situation. And I think somebody was trying to buy peace in their time politically, but I think they've caused a firestorm instead, and now everybody's angry at them.
I wonder what's going to happen with this section of the Act.
Well, the simple answer is to pull 11.1 out. We don't need it. It's already covered well and adequately and working for 20 years. In the School Act, these are matters of education, not of rights for parents, and we got to make sure that we have an education system that is vibrant, diverse, and robust. And this really undermines that. Deal with it in the School Act. It's there. We don't need this.
1-866-468-4422 to join our discussion about the stalemate government's proposed changes to the Alberta Human Rights Act. And please, if you would, keep your comments as brief as possible so we can hear from as many of you as possible today. I suspect this has really struck a chord with people. We'll start with Brett, who's on the line in Calgary. Hi, Brett.
Hi.
What do you think of this?
Well, I'm absolutely astounded that they came out with this ridiculous legislation. I'm part of a group called Center for Inquiry, and we promote values such as science and reason and free inquiry and secularism. And our group is very upset and has gone on a campaign to get as many people as possible to call their MLA and call the Premier and send letters, because we just think it's an abysmal piece of legislation. I agree with pretty much everything that Ken has said so far. I think he's being a little gentle on it.
Hey, I'm a card-carrying member of the party. I got a bias.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that. Thank you, Brett, for calling. It's an interesting perspective, and we appreciate that you called today.